Welcome. I'm going to do a quick intro about myself, but it's more about you guys. But I'm Mona. I'm a venture capital investor for a German VC called Tokentus. And I also am part of the Incubation Council and a DAO member of Hydra Ventures, which is an investment DAO fund of funds. We basically incubate and invest in other investment DAOs. And I have the privilege to speak at several of the How to DAO conferences. And today I have the privilege to moderate this panel. And without further ado, I would like to hand over the mic to you guys, a quick intro, and then also give us a little bit of an overview. You know, how do you define this topic, and how do you see, you know, overall the grants funding landscape?
Oh, plenty of mics. Hi, I'm James. I'm the head of community at Octant. Octant's a platform that started running grant rounds last year from the staking rewards from a really old ETH treasury. So we staked 100,000 ETH, and every 90 days we run our grant rounds that is primarily focused on public goods funding. What was the second question?
Just how do you see the topic? What is a sustainable grant funding to you?
Yes, sustainable grant. So we've been thinking a lot about how our grants program can be a competitive advantage, and obviously because I'm building the community there, how can this be a path for sustainable growth within our community? And so, I'm happy to dive into those topics as we roll along.
Hi, my name is Jana. I am the head of strategy at Rari Foundation. For those of you who have not heard of Rari Foundation, we work on behalf of Rari DAO, which is comprised of Rari token holders that govern the Rarible protocol, which is the decentralized arm of the Rarible NFT marketplace. So the marketplace was built with it, but also different community marketplaces and different integrations. So the protocol is not just for Rarible. And then we also recently launched our own L3 and Arbitrum Orbit that we use as a home for creators. It's a network with embedded royalties on a node level. So as somebody who had strategy, I come up with, ideas, and then I help to execute them. So I kind of span across many different things. Having a healthy community is kind of prerequisite for a healthy ecosystem. So I flex in that direction as well, although we have a community lead who's based in New York. So for those of you who are then later interested in learning more, I will happily put you in touch with her, or you can check out, our online presence. The funding part and sustainable funding part, I think that's kind of nobody cracked it yet type of topic, right? So that's what we're going to be discussing here today. We have started issuing our grants not that long ago. We actually went to the DAO with a proposal to get an ecosystem growth fund together with some key delegates who supported that. So now we have the means as the foundation to do so, because we're an older foundation. So we come from before there was a treasury allocated to the foundation at the moment of airdrop, right? Because now what is happening is the DAO has treasury and foundation has treasury, right? And everybody kind of has their own pockets of money they can tap into. We're an older one, so the DAO has all the money, they have all the power, and then we need to go to the DAO and ask for funding to grow the ecosystem, right? So we have now our own ecosystem growth fund. There is a proposal actually for a top-up as well, because we have two products. We have the protocol and the chain, just to make sure that we have sufficient funding to be growing ecosystem and growing the community for each of them. But it's a live discussion with the community, right? It's a discussion about how do they perceive actual ecosystem growth, what is a positive outcome from the grant program, right? And then the sustainable part, that is the trickiest piece, right? How do you actually turn this into something that sticks?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I'm not sure we know the exact answer, but we'll dive into a few aspects of sustainability. And the first one I want to ask you guys about is about inclusivity. It's about diversity. It's about how create a community, how create an ecosystem that has a variety of skills, that has engagement from the members, that has really a variety of thought processes, individuals involved. How do you set that up? How do you build this? Because I think that's a really important aspect of being a sustainable community in terms of grants, in terms of just general growth.
Yeah, so when I first started working on how we were going to be building the community at Octant, it was really understanding the user personas that we're trying to bring in and mapping out the characteristics that make up that user persona and understanding like the pathways towards contribution. So you can kind of think of these questions about like a specific user persona, like who am I, what do I do, where am I, what's my day-to-day, what motivates me, who convinces me, things like this. And understanding how you can answer these different questions, well, then you'll start to see some patterns that will more or less guide you towards creating programs and structures that will slowly begin to onboard these different user personas. So kind of having an understanding of like who you're trying to bring in, and then on the flip side of that, having rituals and culture and incentives in place so that once they come in, they want to be a part of your community. That's how we're thinking about it.
That's pretty sophisticated, I have to say. So we actually like started from a different place, right? The NFT boom a few years ago attracted a really large community, and they did not stick around, right? The NFT market went down, the community got disengaged, and the DAO became kind of like a shell of itself, right? Like from like a vibrant community, we went to like winter. And when I joined the foundation, like we were in a situation where just like, you know, I used to live in Italy, there's this saying like, just like 4 cats, it's just like a way of saying like there's like nobody, like 4 cats were joining the community calls essentially, right? The conversation on Discord was just about like, actual like the Rarible marketplace and not necessarily about like the ecosystem. And really like the question there was like, how can we attract new community during the like, crypto winter, which was a little bit of an uphill battle. But we started with the DAO, and we started with like bringing new voices into the DAO and driving engagement and participation there. So we ran program to launch new delegates. So usually when you want to be delegate in a DAO, you have to be there at the very beginning, right? So like there's airdrop, there's initial call for delegates, and then you like get your delegations and you become entrenched, right? Or there's some sort of like new like redelegation program, and that's where you can jump in. And it's very hard to actually like get delegations like in the middle, right? You usually need to like show up, contribute on a sustained basis, work for free forever, maybe make a proposal for yourself, right? Like there's a lot of work that goes into it that is unpaid. So we thought like, why don't we just like give people the chance to become delegates, jumpstart them, have them build their credentials in Web3 in DAOs, right? Maybe they will stay with us, maybe they will move on to another DAO, but that's fine. And then similarly to you, we were thinking about like, what are the different like qualifications and personas that we want to attract to the DAO, so we can have like a really vibrant discussion. And then, for each of them, we kind of like basically came up with like, this is why it would be cool for you to become a delegate. And then we ran a recruiting campaign. We selected 15 for the first cohort. Now we have another 15 for a second cohort. And then we actually went from like 5 people voting on a proposal to 55 people voting for a proposal, right? So like we were able to like drive it up. They're not paid, but they're encouraged to like put up proposals and seek remuneration from the DAO, right? Like it's really up to them to find ways to get this, worth their moment. But yeah, we just like, gave them the platform. And to your point, like we want them to be from different parts of the world. We wanted women. It was like 1 woman that applied in the first cohort, which was really sad. And I'm a member of SheFi, and I was like, come on, like we need to do better than that. So actually we do have some SheFi members in the second cohort, which is lovely to see.
Yeah, I think kind of building on what you were saying as well, like there were a lot of DAOs that ultimately failed because I don't think they did that work. Like having an understanding of like what those different pathways to contribution are going to be is really what can drive like sustainable growth for your community. Some of the DAOs that, buck the trend, I think like Constitution DAO or Nouns, like being able to stay top of mind with a really interesting or fun mission, and then really being able to map out like what those pathways for contribution are, because most of the community members who are going to be coming in at first are going to be lurkers. So like slowly getting them out of their shell over time and having these different ways in which they might begin to jump into contribution is really a great way, in my opinion anyway, to really build the community sustainably.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a really, really good input, honestly. And I don't really have anything to add from what I've seen from the investment DAOs that, we've been working with. But one of the things, that I've also, heard in the questions of the previous speaker with regards to Stellar Foundation, who was asked, how do you educate, how do you onboard people? And I guess that's also very much in line with what you've said, right? About sometimes there's a hype and then you get a lot of engagement and all of a sudden there's a winter and then the engagement goes. So how can we make sure that we onboard people in a way that, they really get it, they're really educated, they really understand, what they're a part of, they understand the value no matter what, the hype cycle currently is in. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you experienced any practices that really worked that you could share with us?
Want me to go first? Okay. So onboarding, I think as soon as a community member comes in, having direct connection with them immediately. So you can have ways in which they can share a little bit about themselves, but even making sure that you're following up with them, whether it's you or other community members. I think one of the things that I notice a lot within different communities is there's this lack of understanding between a community and an audience. An audience is when you have like one person who's just talking at everybody. But if you have a community, you have members who've already been familiarized and are ingrained within your culture that then are proactive in onboarding other community members as well. And so making your place comfortable, having a community where like more than just the core team is contributing to fostering that culture that you're ultimately trying to build, I think goes a really long way towards creating lasting community that works.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot the question already.
It was about just education and
Yes,
onboarding,
thank you.
and is there any
Thank
good
you.
practices you've seen?
So I don't like to be like bureaucratic, but you do need to document stuff. So like having a hub for your governance, having a hub for like where, you understand processes, having a hub where you can actually go and read the Constitution, right? That actually has all the links to all the different platforms, because a lot of the times the community does not live in one single platform, right? You have something in Discord, then you have something on forum, we have on-chain voting, then we have Twitter, right? Then we like meet in person. So like how do you connect dots between all the different places where the community is meeting, right? And offer them like a very seamless way of like learning about like what they need to know. Now, don't get me wrong, they will most probably not do it. They will most probably not click on those links, right? So you still need that like one-on-one connection, right? You still need to have like rituals where you meet regularly. We have like bi-weekly calls, right? And like people can like ask questions, and it's fine that it's all the same questions are coming up. It's okay, right? We're like reaching a level of interest in the DAO where it makes sense for us to start having like monthly onboarding calls and just having that like standing meeting, right? So where people can just go and see on the shared calendar, like, yeah, this is where I can, meet the core team, some of the core contributors, and get onboarded, right? And just really like talk to them, like hold their hands. Like these are all the different places where you can like, mention your contribution. This is how you do it. This is how we can help. This is how somebody else can help. These are the people you can lean on. So yeah, just kind of like really helping them before they get comfortable in the new community.
And maybe on that note, and I'll direct a question right back at you, and then we'll come over to you. What about incentive structures? How do you incentivize sustainably, if that's even a thing, your community members and the DAO contributors?
It's a live conversation that we're having right now with some of the delegates, because funnily enough, we did run like an incentive. We ran like a couple of different incentive programs. One was to incentivize delegation. Then there was another one that was like actually like incentivizing transactions like on the protocol and the marketplace. And both of them got critique from like one new community member. And like he was so vocal in his critique on Discord that we were like, okay, let's jump on a call. And then we were like, well, we're just running now the delegate launchpad. Do you want to apply? And do you want to like shape the new incentive program? And we're actually working directly with him and a couple other people from the community to shape the new incentive program in a way that it sticks. And this is exactly the conversation we're having. Like, yeah, like if we're running an incentive program, it can't be just like, hey, you just do this and you get reward. No, it's got to be like, you know what, there's like a leaderboard, and like this is like a sustained action that you need to like do, and like you collect points and you like, rank yourself, and only like at the end of the season you convert this to actual like tokens, right? So like by the time that season is over, like you've already like fully onboarded them, and hopefully like you already like got them hooked.
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we're a unique situation because we're a project that's generating sustainable yield, and you can do some really interesting things with that. So maybe a little alpha right now, but one of the things that we're going to be doing pretty soon here is going and maybe targeting is not the right word, but appealing more to the degenerate gambler crowd, and from the perspective of incentivizing or creating funnels where if you're funding public goods through Octant, then you are potentially able to win a pretty large sum of money. And so I think you can start to look at, you can start to look at the personas that you're ultimately trying to bring, and then start to create incentive structures that create win-win scenarios. And so this is kind of how we're thinking about how we can move just beyond the smaller public goods funding ecosystem into what seems to be the much more prevalent financially incentive crowd.
I love that. That's very innovative. I've not heard this before. I'm going to make a note of that for our investment DAOs. Maybe there's something they can incentivize their members with as well. But yeah, I guess there's gamified incentive programs are on the rise, I think. So very interesting. Thanks for that. And I think maybe one last question from my end, and then I'd love to hear questions from you guys as well, from the audience. But last but not least, what would you say are the biggest challenges that you faced in terms of ecosystem buildings, community building, sustainable community building, or overall in the grant funding ecosystem that you've been a part of, and how can you overcome this, and if there's any advice you can give anybody in the audience on that, and of course any also final remarks from your end on any of the topics we've touched.
Nope. Go ahead.
So I think like the couple talks prior, right, around Swifties, I think what seems to be a little bit underestimated is the culture building aspect. Right, like we talk about incentivization, we talk about path of entry and recruiting, all of that. But if you don't have culture and those incentives run out, that community will flee, right? Like if it's transactional, right? If it's not aligned with values, if it's not aligned with culture, and that's a really hard thing to do, right? It takes a lot of work to build that culture, and it takes a lot of work to sustain that culture, right? And not everybody actually has that angle even, right? So I think part of it is also does your project need a community, right? Like don't just try to build community for the sake of having community. Like, do you actually need one, and why, right? And what is their role? And then, have them fulfill that role, right? Like give them something to do.
Yeah, I think one of our challenges was that we were initially trying to build community from the public goods projects perspective. So trying to bring in supporters of different public goods and onboarding them into our community. And I think that was a miscalculation in my opinion, because we should have been focusing on the community members from the get-go that we're trying to bring in, rather than from the projects to their community members. And so it was because it was one step removed, it created some friction for us. And I'm happy now that we're going to be leaning much more into just going right after the community members that we're ultimately trying to foster in our space. What was the second part of the question you asked? Because I really wanted to answer it.
Well, more in terms of, are there any other aspects you wanted to touch on the previous projects or previous topics we've covered?
Oh, I had a really good answer and I can't remember what it was now. Dang. Maybe it'll come to me.
It's the day free.
I know.
Of ECC.
I'm rested now. I'm over my jet lag. I'm feeling good. Damn. I'll have to think about it. Maybe we'll come back to that one. I'm sorry.
While we have a think, are there any questions from the audience? I mean, I have a few more, but I would love to rather hear from you guys.
I remember what it is.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
okay, we'll
totally.
get back to you in a second.
Sorry. One of the frictions I think we found specifically within Octant was that people aren't so much interested in donating, but that we are very convinced that they might be interested in investing in public goods. And so if there's this feedback loop that we can start to create, kind of like what Optimism is doing with Retro, but being at the early stage of that life cycle, to where if we are investing in public goods that might be able to create impact later, and then we're minting hypercerts to where those investors then might actually have a financial or a social sort of feedback loop coming back to them, then we're confident. There's a lot of ifs there, but we're much more convinced that this is an interesting model for us to explore, rather than just expecting people to self-taxate through Octant, because no one likes taxation, and that's not fun. So, yeah, that's what we're thinking. Cool. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
I was like, I know there's something good.
Maybe get your question.
Yeah, a theme that's come out in your panel here and then earlier with Azim's presentation is how the importance of culture in sustaining these communities, and the importance of culture in sustaining communities and engaging people. Otherwise, once those incentive structures fall down, they're gone. I was hoping maybe you'd talk a little bit more from your perspective within your communities about how the steps you've taken to try to create that culture.
Rituals. So, like having some reason for the community to come back weekly and check in and engage. So we've created community calls where we try to highlight the projects that are going to be participating in the round. Those projects can share some of the history of what their work has been on and what they're going to be building on in the future. We want to create some memified culture as well that leans more towards the financial aspect. So at Octant, we're trying to create this win-win situation to where the public is funding ecosystem and also the users are financially and otherwise supported. So I think trying to strike this balance to where we're not just creating culture around the projects, but we're also creating culture for the community members from the financial and the meme, and just having a good time overall. That's what we're thinking about long and hard these days. Oh, sorry.
Sharing one now.
Oh, we are. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think it's just like one thing to add there is, like when I talk to delegates, right, and they're like, okay, great, so I'm going to be like part of this delegate launchpad. Can I get paid? Well, first of all, like if that's your first question, it's probably like making it a little bit hard for us to select you to become like the recipient of this, right? Like that shouldn't be your primary motivation. But I always say that really is up to you. And we are here to like root for you and like please think about ways you can make money. And the ways you will make money is by contributing to the ecosystem and doing some work, right? So suddenly you create a loop where it's like, hey, member, think hard about how you can contribute to the DAO. And then of course you will be paid, right? And there is like one new delegate from like a few months ago, and he's just blazing through proposals, like working group here, working group there, to the point where we're like, just hold the brakes now, right? Like you already have 3 working groups that you're overseeing. I think you're maybe like are tapping yourself out. But, you know, he's like taking on really important topics, like, you know, helping with governance, help with tokenomics. I think I'm like forgetting kind of like what's the third one, right? And he's like organizing the resources in the DAO, right? And he gets paid as somebody who oversees, but he's also then going to be held accountable that these working groups deliver, right? So cultural rituals, but then also like give them a way to like make this worthwhile, right? Like create a path for making money.
And I also would like to add something because I see a lot of the DAOs that we incubate, right? And they're focused on different things. Some investing in the Cosmos ecosystem, some investing in the Urbit ecosystem, some are investing in female founders, some are investing in you name it. That's kind of how the Hydra Ventures is structured in terms of the DAOs that we kind of spin out. But what we've seen to create culture and community is also, I think rituals is a good way to put it. Or for us, it's also it's bureaucratic, but it's kind of regular meetings and, you know, getting people involved in the meetings, having an agenda, making people kind of stand out, say thank you, right? Thank you for doing this. Thank you for organizing the event at EthCC. Thank you for doing that working group. And it kind of gets people ownership and the feeling of belief and belonging, right? And that's been really great for creating a culture that's people feel like, okay, I'm going somewhere here.
I'm just going to add that highlighting of members who contribute goes such a long way, right? Like, because I was talking about like, you know, giving them a chance to make money, but sometimes all you have to say is like calling them out on a community call or including them in your newsletter, right? Giving them a special shout out, or like we retweet them from our official accounts, right? The contributions that they're doing, or like we hook them up with an interview with like a different partner about something they did, right? That like actually impacts like, you know, how we all work together. So we like help them get visibility. We also, with this like delegate launchpad cohorts, these delegations are not like forever. You get them for 6 months. For the first 3 months, you get like 100% of the delegation, and then the next 3 months, your voting power starts decaying. So in those 3 months, you're supposed to be campaigning with the wider community, and like you already had a chance to like establish yourself, and then try those community delegations. If you're doing a good job, we're gonna include you in like our newsletters that goes to like big token holders, right? Like, and they know. And then we establish like a delegate score for them, which is calculated based on their like forum and tally activity, so on-chain, off-chain governance. And the higher your score, like the higher you are on the list, right? When we're like sending information to investors and stuff like that. So it's just creating other ways for them to stand out, right, based on their contributions.
I think we have another question.
Yeah, I really like what you are all just saying, basically, how long other things that could be categorized as incentives but are not really thought about as incentives, and I don't think about it as incentives, but if you look at it from what happened afterwards, it is incentives. Like mentioning someone is a retroactive incentives, I would argue, but it's an incentive picked on the basis of the person and not trying to make the person care about the incentive that's available, like an airdrop, but looking at the person, seeing what the person does anyways, and then looking at what does the person care about. And many times if somebody does something without knowing before if they get paid for it, they're not really, like, that's nice, but that's not the main reason. And so when I think about incentives, especially external incentives, because there are also internal incentives, right? Like I feel good if I do something, that's my internal incentive. And external incentives for me are about sustaining and not about, I don't want to pay someone to do something. I want to pay someone so that they can keep doing something. And if that's the case, then that can be great. But so my question is, have you ever seen anywhere the case where an external incentives led to something genuine, whether that's community building, whether that's contribution, whether that's voting, however the participation looked like, whether that's giving money? Have you ever seen where that was happening in a genuine, long-term, sustainable way, and that was initiated and started by an external incentive?
Yes. We have a financial product at the end of the day at Octant. So you come in, you lock your tokens, and the idea is that you can take those rewards and keep them. But that at the same time, we are trying to create those funnels to where Octant's not just about the individual side, that there's this collective side as well. So doing our best to highlight that we have community calls and that even small donations go a long way, because the matching pool up until this point has been around a 50x leverage. So every dollar that you donate, $50 gets matched on top. So we have seen community members that were totally motivated by financial, but then are recognizing what else is possible with Octant and have begun to contribute or donate to public goods in that way. So yeah, it's definitely possible. I think, the story with what Iwaki talks about how, there's a bunch of degens that came into the space and then they got rugged, and then eventually they realized that there's a lot more to crypto than just the financial stuff. Like I've met a lot of regens that were purely motivated by profit earlier in their life cycle. So yeah, there's definitely that story arc that I think a lot of people follow, and hopefully more people start to walk that path.
Yeah, and then it also like depends if you're trying to do this on scale or not, right? Like if you're doing like one-on-one, sure, you can turn people around, right? But it's like not really something that you can do like en masse. We had one delegate who came with this like BD mentality. It's like, I'm going to do all these partnerships, I'm just going to make this DAO work really hard for me. And like he's a member of so many different DAOs, right? And then we were working with him like one-on-one, and he actually wanted to unlock funding for like content creation. We were like, sure, you can. But like through this content, like bring education back to the DAO, right? So now he actually like finished his like content series, and he's coming back to the DAO in the next community call. He's gonna present everything he uncovered through like interviewing different people for these content series, and he's really doing a digest. And we're all about pushing the NFT use case forward and like finding innovative ways NFTs are being used, and then helping those ways to be adopted through like us serving them decentralized infrastructure to build on, right? So he's going to come back and he will talk to the community about, well, these are all the NFT use cases we can all collectively be thinking about, right? And this is what people are doing with them, right? But it's not something that you can necessarily like scale, right? But you can definitely work with people one-on-one, and it's, you know, it's funny because we're talking about DAOs where it's all supposed to be automatic, right? And like remote and like kind of remove the human factor. And ironically, the human factor is like where most of the work goes into.
I would push back against that a little bit. Spicy take. So I don't think anyone's figured it out yet, but I think if you find the right carrot and that carrot is big enough or can cover enough surface area, that's why I really like this raffle idea, because I think if you use a raffle that dangles this financial carrot in front of enough degens and then they continue to participate in public goods funding, then this is like a clear pathway of trying to get some sticky sort of culture baked into them that, you know, you can do more than just, you know, financially motivating yourself or financially getting the gains. Still hypothesis. I guess we'll wait to be seen. But I really want to start to experiment with these like win-win sort of programs, because I do think if we can start to scale these ideas, then there will be the potential to you know, scale these pathways so that there's people that give a shit, or more people that give a shit in the ecosystem.
And that's it for today. Thank you, Jana. Thank you, James. Thank you, Mona. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good talk. Thank you.